Imagine for a moment that everything we know about the miracles performed by Christ hides a language not understood by most people. A code so ancient and subtle that it doesn't appear in the Gospels explicitly, but operates like an invisible gear behind every supernatural manifestation. A language that is neither Hebrew nor Aramaic, but rather a hidden arrangement of vibrations, primal sounds that shape reality itself. This mystery, long preserved among initiates and spiritual masters, is known as the Order of the 72 Names of God, a legacy hidden among sacred lines, kept silent for centuries, but now beginning to be unveiled. By decoding these keys, we not only delve into the essence of Christ's miracles, but also touch the heart of a forgotten universal language that transcends religions, cultures, and beliefs. For centuries, scholars, mystics, and Kabbalists have sought to understand how great spiritual figures performed feats that defied human logic. From the parting of the Red Sea to the resurrection of Lazarus, there was something deeper happening. An access to the invisible matrix of existence, and within this matrix, sacred vibrations operated as direct commands to the consciousness of the universe. Kabbalah, the Jewish mystical tradition, asserts that there are 72 divine names encoded in the scriptures, which operate as bridges between the material and spiritual world. These are not common names. They are vibrational formulas composed of 3 Hebrew letters each, derived from a specific passage of the Book of Exodus. These names do not represent separate entities, but aspects of the Supreme One, distinct manifestations of the creative force that permeates all things. The origin point of these 72 names is hidden in one of the most symbolic events of the Old Testament, the crossing of the Red Sea by Moses and the Hebrew people. According to the Kabbalah, verses 19, 20, and 21 of chapter 14 of Exodus contain 3 sentences with exactly 72 letters each. By rearranging these letters in a specific way, from right to left, then from left to right, and again from right to left, a sequence of 72 unique combinations of 3 letters is formed. Each combination represents a name of power. This operation, seemingly random, was actually a sacred formula used by Moses to activate the parting of the waters. It was not a simple gesture with a staff, as many imagine. It was the application of hidden knowledge, a directed frequency that resonated in the invisible structures of reality and responded with a miracle. But what Moses accessed at that moment was not limited to a single intervention. He was invoking something that transcends time, a coded language that manifests where faith meets hidden knowledge. The esoteric tradition asserts that this knowledge was passed from generation to generation among the prophets, and that, at its peak, it was understood and applied by none other than Jesus, the Christ, not as a trick, nor as a heresy, but as the full manifestation of a divine wisdom that unites word, vibration, and intention in a single creative act. Christ, when touching the blind, when transforming water into wine, when raising the dead, would have, according to this line of thought, accessed this same power. But instead of repeating it as a formula, he would have embodied it as a living essence. The direct mention of the 72 names does not appear in the Gospels, and that's why so many scholars overlook them. However, the Gospels were written in languages that did not carry the full weight of the oral and mystical tradition of the time. Much of what Jesus taught was coded, spoken in parables, and only understood by those who had ears to hear. The Essenes, a group with which Jesus possibly had contact, were already practicing deep meditation techniques and sacred chants with the divine names. The Kabbalistic tradition and the texts of the Zohar describe these practices as ways to alter reality through word and vibration. In this context, the miracles performed by Christ cease to seem like violations of natural laws and start to be understood as the advanced use of laws not yet understood by modern science. Each of the 72 names represents a vibrational key, a password to access the divine network. They are not names in the traditional sense. They do not have conventional pronunciation nor direct meaning. They are energy structures composed of 3 Hebrew letters that, when vocalized with pure intention and elevated consciousness, alter the surrounding field. The idea behind this is that the universe responds to specific sound patterns, and these sounds operate as commands over the energy matrix that sustains matter. Just like a computer password opens a system, the divine names open portals of healing, transformation, and elevation. Christ, as awakened consciousness, would have understood this intuitively, or received this instruction in the lost years of his youth, far from the traditional biblical records. Within the tradition of Kabbalah, these names were not freely shared. Access was restricted to initiates, as it was understood that misuse of these frequencies could cause imbalance rather than healing. This secret language is not made for manipulation, but for reconnection. For it to work, one must be in alignment with the divine purpose. Therefore, the use of the 72 names requires not only technical knowledge, but also purity of heart. The inner frequency needs to be tuned with the intent of service, love, and healing. Otherwise, the name does not operate, or worse, it resonates in dissonance, generating confusion instead of clarity. Christ, being the incarnation of compassion and love, was in perfect harmony with this language. He not only used it, he was the Word made flesh, the divine sound manifested in human form. The connection between the 72 names and the acts of Christ is not merely symbolic, but energetic. Each miracle described in the Gospels can be seen as an expression of this deep alignment between sound, intention, and divinity. The multiplication of loaves, for example, was not just a physical event, but a manipulation of abundance from the recognition of unity. Walking on water was not just a suspension of gravity, but a demonstration that, when the frequency is high enough, the body obeys other laws. The healing of the blind, the paralyzed, the lepers, all these acts involve the restructuring of energy in the person's field, and this, according to the wisdom of the names, is possible when the correct sound is pronounced, with the exact intention and a pure heart. Christ often withdrew to pray in silence. These prayers were not simply words directed at a distant God. They were deep intonations, perhaps even silent, of sacred sounds. The repetition of certain phonemes, the meditation on divine combinations, the full surrender to a specific frequency, all this is part of the practices preserved by mystics over the centuries. Kabbalist monks still chant the 72 names today as a way of reconnecting with the source. It is possible that Jesus did the same, not as an external ritual, but as an internal state of being. He became the channel, the very living vibration, and in this state, the impossible became natural. This hidden language is not just a tool of power, but a reminder that creation is sound and that we are made of the same substance. We are, in essence, condensed vibration. When Christ said, "You will do even greater things than these," he was not speaking in metaphors. He was extending an invitation, a call for everyone to recognize the divine spark within themselves and learn to use the word, the sacred sound, as a tool for transformation. The 72 names, then, are not just a mystery from the past. They are a map, a legacy, a spiritual technology that points to the true nature of the human being. In light of this, we need to ask ourselves, how many other languages have been forgotten? How many other keys still lie hidden in the scriptures, waiting for an awakened heart to reveal them? The order of the 72 names is not just a mystical curiosity. It's a reminder that there is much more operating behind the scenes of life than we can see. And that faith, allied with sacred knowledge, has the power to alter destinies. Christ's miracles were not exceptions, they were demonstrations, and the code behind these acts begins to be revealed now when we are ready to hear it. When we speak of the great mysteries of humanity, few events carry as much symbolic and spiritual power as the flight from Egypt led by Moses. The crossing of the Red Sea, often reduced to a dramatic scene in biblical texts, hides behind its narrative a highly coded spiritual technology, a language of light that not only defied natural laws, but also revealed a cosmic intelligence acting directly on matter. This was not just a geographical escape. It was a vibrational liberation, the breaking of an energetic yoke that kept an entire people submissive to a system of oppression. By extending his arm over the sea and causing the division of the waters, Moses was accessing a field that transcended the physical, and it was exactly at this point in history that the 72 names of God were born, not as abstract symbols, but as operational tools capable of reconfiguring reality. It is essential to understand that Egypt was not just a foreign nation in the biblical narrative. It symbolized the confinement of consciousness, the imprisonment of the spirit within the dense structures of matter and ego. The liberation of the Hebrew people was, simultaneously, the liberation of a portion of humanity that was moving from fear to faith, from imprisonment to expansion. Moses, as the conductor of this process, was not merely a political leader or religious prophet. He was the channel between worlds, the interpreter of a lost language that manifested itself at moments when human logic unraveled and a superior order took hold. And this language, veiled in the verses of Exodus, would be the seed of the 72 names, a sonic encoding that, when activated, altered the very fabric of reality. Verses 19, 20, and 21 of chapter 14 of Exodus form one of the most mysterious codes in the Bible. Each one of them has exactly 72 letters in the original Hebrew, a detail that goes unnoticed by ordinary readers, but has caught the attention of mystics and Kabbalists over the centuries. By arranging these three sentences in parallel lines, the first being read from right to left, the second from left to right, and the third again from right to left, an alternating reading pattern is formed that results in 72 unique sequences of 3 letters. Each of these sequences is considered a name of God, a miniature of the divine, a sonic spark of pure creative power. This is the exact moment when Kabbalah locates the birth of the order of the 72 names, not as theory, but as spiritual practice embodied in a historical event. What makes this revelation even more powerful is that Moses, by performing the symbolic gesture of raising the staff and commanding the sea to part, was, in the esoteric view, activating each of these 72 frequencies in sequence. Like a cosmic conductor, he orchestrated a symphony of invisible forces, summoning the waters to move according to divine will. The miracle did not occur through mere blind faith, but through deep knowledge of how to interact with the codes of creation. Each name served as an energetic command, a thread that pulled reality out of its common programming, and this process, repeated with precision and intent, created a breach in the fabric of the world. The sea responded, not as a passive element, but as a consciousness in tune with a higher order. Moses, then, was not merely leading the people physically, he was rewriting the laws of the world as he walked. The Kabbalah teaches that the 72 names are not merely arbitrary combinations. Each of these triads carries a spiritual quality, an essential virtue of the divine. There are names that operate over time, others over space, some over the physical body, and others over the mind and emotions. Each name is a living frequency that can be activated through meditation, correct intonation, and the elevation of intention. In the context of the escape from Egypt, the activation of the names was linked to the transmutation of collective fear into faith. The people, facing the sea and the Egyptian army, were plunged into despair. And Moses, by accessing the names, transformed the despair into passage, the chaos into a path. This is the real miracle, not the separation of the waters itself, but the change in vibrational state that allowed the impossible to become inevitable. This event also marks a turning point in the spiritual history of mankind. Until then, great divine feats were attributed exclusively to God. From the crossing, a new paradigm emerges. The human being as a co-creator, as one who, by accessing the sacred code, actively participates in the creative flow of the universe. Moses becomes an archetype of a spiritual master who not only receives revelations, but knows how to activate them. He embodies the principle that divine knowledge can and should be used responsibly, with the heart turned towards the collective good. And it is precisely this vision that connects Moses to Christ, not just as historical figures, but as conscious channels of the same primordial source. Both operated from the sacred word. Both knew that reality is shaped by what is said with pure intention. It is important to emphasize that this type of knowledge was not accessible to the general public. The initiated spent years in silence, study, and purification before they were considered worthy of receiving even the first letter combination. The mystery schools, both in Egypt and among the Hebrews, kept this knowledge hidden, protecting it from selfish or destructive uses. The code of the 72 names, therefore, was not just a technical secret. It was a spiritual trial by fire. Only those who could free themselves from their own internal Egypts could effectively access the keys to creation. This liberation involved facing one's own fears, letting go of control, surrendering to divine intelligence, and trusting the guidance that arises from the inner silence. If we look at the historical context, we will also understand that the crossing of the sea was not just an external movement. It was a transition of eras. Humanity, symbolized by the Hebrew people, was leaving behind the enslavement of spiritual ignorance and taking the first steps towards the autonomy of the soul. The sea, in this sense, represents the collective unconscious, vast, deep, frightening. To cross it is to delve into one's own shadow, to traverse the deepest fears and emerge on the other side with an expanded consciousness. The 72 names, then, are like ropes thrown over this sea, safe ways to traverse the invisible with courage and wisdom. They operate as guides, tools, instruments of alignment between human will and divine purpose. The parallel with Christ's miracles becomes inevitable at this point. If Moses accessed the names to part the sea, Christ would have done the same to open the eyes of the blind, the ears of the deaf, and the hearts of the hardened. Each miraculous action, from the perspective of divine codes, is a vibrational response. There is no manipulation, only realignment. There is no magic, only sacred physics. Christ, unlike Moses, no longer needed to raise his staff. His very presence, his word, his gaze, carried the correct frequency. He was the name itself, the vibration itself, the word made flesh. And this was only possible because the path had been prepared. Moses parted the sea, Christ opened the heavens. The continuity of this legacy leads us to a deeper understanding of the role of the 72 names, not only as elements of the past, but as timeless technologies available to those who seek sincerely. They are not restricted to masters or prophets. They are invitations, portals, paths for all of us. The crossing of the Red Sea, when read with spiritual eyes, is a symbolic manual on how to overcome our own limitations. Moses was not fleeing from the Egyptians. He was transcending a limited reality. He was not just an external liberator. He was an internal awakener, calling us to escape from the slavery of doubt, fear, mental rigidity. And the 72 names are the tools left as a legacy. Each generation that connects with these names updates their inner frequency. By meditating on these combinations, we not only access ancient knowledge, but we reactivate within us the same field of power that moved Moses and inspired Christ. Miracles become possible not by violation of the laws, but by a higher understanding of them. The divine language has never ceased to operate. We just forgot how to listen to it. The escape from Egypt was, and still is, a call to listen. The sea remains before us, and the names continue to vibrate. It's up to us to remember how to cross. Everything that exists vibrates. Every atom, cell, thought, word, and emotion emanates a frequency. In the visible and invisible universe, nothing is static. What we call solid matter is, in fact, a compact dance of vibrations, and this understanding is not new. Ancient civilizations already knew that sound was the generating principle of all reality. And within this millennial understanding lies one of the most hidden yet powerful keys: the alphabet of creation. The 22 characters of the Hebrew alphabet, used in the formation of the 72 names of God, are not mere linguistic symbols, but living archetypes that contain the original codes of the universe. Each letter carries a unique vibration, a specific intelligence, and a fundamental role in the mechanism of creation. Sound, therefore, is not just communication, but cosmic engineering. When emitted with consciousness, it shapes, heals, transforms, and reveals. This is not some isolated mystical theory. In traditions from various parts of the world, we find the same premise. The universe was created through sound. In Hinduism, the Om is considered the primal sound, the vibration that gave birth to everything. In esoteric Christianity, we have the Word, described in the Gospel of John as the principle through which everything was made. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. This word was not an ordinary word. It was the original sound, the absolute vibration, the sonic manifestation of divine consciousness. And when Hebrew mystics talk about the 72 names of God, they are referring exactly to this. the possibility to access and use in a practical way the frequencies that underpin all creation. This is not about religion, but about spiritual physics. The sacred language operates like a cosmic score. Each name is a note, each note a creative action. To fully understand this phenomenon, one must delve into the concept of resonance. When a sound is emitted at a certain frequency, it triggers specific reactions in everything within its vibrational reach. Just as a musical note can make a crystal glass tremble or shatter, sacred sounds, when precisely emitted, alter the vibrational state of everything around. Moreover, they also change the vibrational state of the emitter. The human body, in this context, functions as a divine instrument. The vocal cords, the respiratory system, the electromagnetic field of the heart and brain, everything works together to produce and channel frequencies. When we intone one of the 72 names of God, we are not just vocalizing sounds, we are recalibrating our connection with the creative source, harmonizing our internal systems with universal intelligence. Each of the 72 names is formed by 3 Hebrew letters. These letters, in turn, are made up of specific geometric strokes, and it is believed that this geometry also contains creation codes. The vibration is not just auditory, it is also visual, energetic, spiritual. For this reason, many Kabbalah practitioners meditate visually on the names, even without pronouncing them. Silent contemplation, coupled with pure intention, is already enough to awaken their influence. Others prefer intonation, repeating the name like a mantra, a vibrational invocation that passes through the body and echoes in the subtle field around it. In both cases, the common point is the recognition that sound, combined with consciousness, is a tool for transformation. That's why Christ, being the Word made flesh, did not need instruments, rituals, or external formulas. He understood, in the very essence of his being, that creation responds to the vibration of the word spoken with spiritual authority. When he said, "Rise and walk," he was not merely issuing a physical command. He was accessing the correct code of sound, intention, and energy that reorganized the sick person's vibrational structure. Healing occurred because the word activated the original remembrance of health. Similarly, when he turned water into wine or multiplied loaves, he made use of a language that acted directly on the matrix of matter. And this language was the sacred sound, the pure vibration, the same one that comprises the 72 names. Modern science is beginning to touch on these mysteries, albeit in a different language. Quantum physics now recognizes that reality is not made up of solid particles, but by fields of probability and energy in constant vibration. The observer influences the observed, and intention alters the outcome. This is not far from what ancient spiritual masters have always said, that what we emit, in sound, thought, or emotion, shapes the world around us. The word, in this context, is a form of creative energy, and the 72 names of God would be the purest and most concentrated expressions of this energy. They function as cosmic passwords, access codes to higher dimensions of consciousness, where healing, abundance, peace, and love are natural states. The correct intonation of names is not something that is learned solely through technique. It requires a state of mind, internal alignment, humility, and inner silence. The frequency emitted by the human voice deeply depends on the emotional field. If someone pronounces a sacred name with anger, fear, or selfish desire, it does not vibrate at the correct frequency, and the result can be null or even opposite. Therefore, the ancients taught that working with names required purification, not in the moralistic sense, but in the energetic one. The body, mind, and heart needed to be in harmony. Only then could the sacred word flow with real power. Christ exemplified this in every gesture, in every silence. His speech was imbued with vibrational coherence. He did not speak of God, he vibrated as God. The 72 names do not need to be intellectually understood to work. The logical mind is useful, but limited. What matters is the field of intention. When chanted sincerely, even if the practitioner does not understand the meaning of each letter, the names act. They access deep layers of the subconscious, unlock ancient traumas, dissolve energy blockages, and realign the being with its divine origin. Even more so, They become portals of communication between the human and the divine, between the particle and the whole. Just as an instrument needs to be tuned to play a perfect melody, the human being needs to be in tune with its essence to emit sounds that heal, that open paths, that liberate. There is infinite beauty in this ancestral wisdom. Knowing that we are not separated from the divine, but that we have within us the same alphabet of creation, the same ability to pronounce life, is one of the greatest spiritual revelations. When we look at the miracles of Christ, we should not see them as demonstrations of a superhuman, unreachable being. We should see them as reminders of who we truly are. What he did, he said we could also do. And even more. This is not arrogance, but destiny. The 72 names are silent invitations to rediscover our original voice. The one that does not fear, does not judge, does not destroy. The one that heals, liberates, transforms, and creates. At the heart of this vibrational language is intention. It's not enough to just speak. One must feel, align, deliver. Names do not respond to mental effort, but to the surrender of the heart. Therefore, when Christ pronounced words of power, he was in an absolute state of surrender. He was not seeking to control the miracle. He became the channel through which the miracle flowed. This is the great lesson behind the sonic power of the 72 names, that the true power is not in mastering God's language, but in allowing it to inhabit us, to transform us, to use us. When this happens, we not only hear the music of creation, we become part of it, like instruments tuned to the eternal sound of the Word. And so, by understanding that the universe is sound and that the 72 names are sacred chords of this great cosmic symphony, we also understand that each of us carries the ability to intone new realities, to pronounce not just words but destinies, to align our vibration with that of the Source, and, with this, consciously participate in the continuous creation of everything that is. The Word has never been just sound, it has always been power. And now, by recalling the alphabet of creation, we take the first steps to rediscover the language that shapes worlds. Long before the Gospels were written, long before the cross, the church, or the dogmatic interpretations that shaped Christianity over the centuries, there existed a deep and living tradition. A silent yet powerful lineage, preserving the mysteries of the Spirit and the secrets of creation with reverence, silence, and precision. Among these lineages, perhaps none were as mysterious as the Essenes. Living on the fringes of conventional Jewish society, distant from the corrupted temples and political power of Jerusalem, the Essenes devoted themselves to the cultivation of purity, spiritual discipline, and direct access to the divine. And it is precisely in this setting that we find one of the most important and rarely discussed clues about the youth of Jesus, because although the Gospels say nothing about his years between 12 and 30, the esoteric tradition persistently points to this period as a phase of intense formation, a true spiritual initiation led by masters who understood the language of the stars, the sacred names, and the human soul. The region of Qumran, on the shores of the Dead Sea, where the famous manuscripts that revolutionized the understanding of Hebrew spirituality were found, was inhabited by an Essene community deeply connected with cosmic cycles, hidden texts, and the secrets of the Word. There, in silence, they studied celestial movements, practiced fasting, meditations, and purifications with water, and chanted sacred names with rigor and reverence. Their days were governed by a precise order, high ethical codes, and an unwavering commitment to light. The Essenes understood that the world was maintained by invisible forces, and that accessing these forces required more than faith. It required mastery of vibration, sound, and intention. Not surprisingly, many scholars believe that Jesus lived among them, absorbing their teachings, understanding the mechanics of sacred language, and preparing for what he would later accomplish. This possibility resonates in countless apocryphal stories, in Gnostic traditions, and in hidden records that describe Jesus as someone who underwent various initiatory stages before beginning his public mission. Not only with the Essenes, but also in Egypt, Greece, and possibly even in India, he would have studied the teachings that unified all the great spiritual schools of antiquity. But among all this knowledge, the Essenes held something very specific: the practice of the names of God as a transformative frequency. According to some traditions, there was among them a restricted group called Sons of Light, formed by those who were authorized to work with the sacred names, especially the 72nd. These individuals not only knew the sequence of the letters, but they knew how to chant them, how to breathe them, how to invoke them at the exact moment when the miracle was necessary. The Essenes did not see miracles as exceptions to nature, but as expressions of its highest level. For them, matter was merely a reflection of an energetic and vibrational structure. Healing, multiplying, transmuting, levitating, or regenerating was simply operating at the higher levels of creation, where sound is command, and the word is a creative force. Within this context, Jesus would have learned not just to repeat the names, but to incorporate them, to vibrate them in every cell, to merge with the essence of each one of them. This mystical union with the Word is what would have granted him the authority to say, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." Not as an ego statement, but as the living expression of someone who had become one with God's language. In their daily practices, the Essenes maintained a sacred silence. This silence was not empty, but filled with listening. They taught that, to hear the name, one must silence the inner world, that God's voice does not shout, it whispers within the being. In this state of listening, of absolute surrender, the names could be chanted effectively, and Jesus, known among them as Yeshua, would have stood out for the depth of his silence, for his ability to listen beyond the mind, to feel beyond the body, to vibrate beyond words. He would have been prepared not to preach a new dogma, but to remind humanity of something that had been forgotten, that we are made in the image and likeness of the Creator's sound, that in each of us dwells the same spark that formed the heavens, the seas, and the stars, and that the sacred names are mirrors of this spark, capable of rekindling the memory of our origin. During the so-called hidden years, Jesus not only studied the sacred texts, but also directly experienced the power they held. Deep breathing practices, specific chants, intense visualizations, prolonged fasts, baths of light, and extended silence all shaped his energy field. Each day his body vibrated at subtler frequencies until density no longer affected him in the same way. He did not heal because he possessed a magical gift, but because his presence was a healing frequency. His vibrational field, trained and expanded through the practice of the names, dissolved diseases, restored cells, transmuted realities. And this authority did not come from a religious position, but from the alchemy performed in his own inner temple. The most fascinating thing is to realize that the wisdom of the Essenes was not confined to the past. Their manuscripts, rediscovered just a few decades ago, reveal practices that echo the discoveries of modern physics. They knew, for example, that water has memory and that certain sounds could alter its structure, that the cycles of the moon and sun influence the body and mind, that fasting is not just deprivation, but cellular recalibration, that silence is not the absence of sound, but the space to hear the true voice, and that the word, when used consciously, is capable of healing any wound, physical, emotional, or spiritual. This wisdom, applied by Christ, is the real secret behind his miracles. When he multiplied food, he wasn't creating something out of nothing. He was accelerating a natural replication process, tapping into the energy matrix of abundance and bringing it to the material plane. When he healed a paralytic, he wasn't violating biology, but restoring the energy flow that had been interrupted by traumas, beliefs, or ancient karmas. When he walked on water, he wasn't defying gravity, but tuning his body's density to the lightness of the light that he had cultivated within himself. All of this was possible because the names were alive within him, vibrating, singing, resonating like invisible bells in the temple of his body. He was the temple, he was the vibration, he was the name. The Essenes predicted that a master of justice would come, someone who would synthesize the teachings of the ancients, who would embody the word and make it accessible again. Someone who would not only teach love, but would be love itself in human form. For many within this lineage, Jesus was that master. The initiate who not only surpassed the veils, but who returned with the map in his hands, offering everyone the chance to follow the same path. A path of vibration, of sacred word, of alignment with the 72 aspects of the divine. Not a path of external worship, but of internal realization. The connection between the names and the Essenes is more than symbolic. It is vibrational. They understood that every human being is a forgotten divine name, that by rediscovering this name, by vibrating it, by chanting it with an open heart, we return to the source. We return to the original state of harmony, health, clarity, and communion with everything that exists. Jesus' work was, ultimately, to remind us of this, that miracles were not the privileges of a chosen one, but demonstrations of what happens when a human being returns to their true vibrational nature, when one aligns with the names and becomes the very sound of creation. The Essenes vanished from the desert sands, but left traces behind. Fragments of scrolls, chants, practices, and memories that continue to echo to this day. And more than that, they left the example of a lifestyle connected with the essence. Jesus, the initiate, was a fruit of this vibrational field, and looking at his life through the eyes of vibration, we understand that every healing, every word, every gesture was a name being intoned, a code being activated, a miracle being remembered, because in the end, every miracle is just reality returning to its original state of perfection, guided by the correct vibration. And the Essenes knew this. They prepared the soil. Jesus was the seed. We are the harvest. The miracles of Christ are, to this day, one of the most intriguing and controversial expressions of human history. Over the centuries, theologians, scientists, mystics, and skeptics have tried to understand how a man, without any apparatus, could perform feats that violated all known laws of physics and biology. Walking on water, resurrecting the dead, instantly healing diseases considered incurable, multiplying food, calming storms with a simple verbal command. These actions defy any conventional paradigm, but the question has never been whether these miracles happened or not, but how they were possible. The mistake of traditional thinking lies in trying to understand the extraordinary with the tools of ordinary logic. And what we are now beginning to realize, based on the hidden codes of spirituality and the principles of vibration, is that Jesus' miracles were not breaks from natural laws. They were activations of higher laws, still ignored by common perception. When we observe the Gospels with eyes trained in esoteric sciences, particularly in Kabbalah and the wisdom of the 72 names, we discover that each miracle performed by Jesus has a specific vibrational pattern. They were not random, impulsive, or improvised acts. Each healing, each multiplication, each transfiguration followed a sequence of intention, word, and vibration. It was precise spiritual engineering, operated masterfully by someone who knew the invisible mechanisms of creation. The miracles, therefore, were manifestations of the divine language acting in real time through a being totally aligned with the source. It was not about blind faith, nor about obscure mystical powers, but about the conscious and loving application of the keys to reality, the sacred names. And understanding this brings us closer not only to the truth behind Christ's acts, but also to our own innate potential. Let's take the healing of the lepers as an example. In the context of that time, leprosy was not just a physical disease. It represented spiritual impurity, social separation, human exile. Healing a leper meant restoring their dignity, their identity, and their connection with the divine. When Christ touched these people and said words like "be clean," he was not just giving a physical command. He was emitting a precise vibration, aligned with the sacred name corresponding to purification, to the restoration of cellular integrity, and to the reintegration of the soul into the body. That word, in that tone, with that intention, activated the divine memory in the patient's vibrational field. And where there was once disharmony, there was now coherence. The body responded to the new information, and the miracle happened. Another emblematic example is that of Lazarus' resurrection. Upon receiving the news of his friend's death, Jesus withdraws in silence, cries, prays. He then approaches the tomb and shouts, "Lazarus, come forth." What seems like a simple phrase is in fact a vibrational invocation. Lazarus represents the name, the identity, the point of connection between soul and body. By calling him by name, Christ activates the specific frequency of that being. The command, "Come forth," is not just spatial, it's energetic. It pulls Lazarus's consciousness back to the physical plane, realigns his vibrational field with the body, and restarts biological life. There's no magic, there's vibration. And this vibration operates based on precise codes, the same ones we find in the 72 names. Each name has a field of action, and the correct combination between them is capable of producing events that the human mind still classifies as miraculous. One of the most fascinating aspects of this understanding is that Christ's miracles, although extraordinary, followed an invisible logic. They were not arbitrary exceptions, but perfect expressions of a higher order. And this is exactly what the ancient Kabbalists always taught: that the visible world is only the surface of a much broader reality, where matter obeys consciousness, not the other way around. Christ demonstrated this in every action. When multiplying loaves and fishes, he did not create food out of thin air. He accessed the frequency of abundance, dissolved the illusion of scarcity, and allowed reality to reorganize according to the loving intention of the source. The food was not multiplied, it was revealed. It had always been there, in potential, merely waiting for the right vibration to bring it into the visible plane. This is where we delve into the issue of the Logos, the divine word which, according to the Gospel of John, was in the beginning with God and through which all things were made. This Logos is not a philosophical discourse nor a poetic metaphor. It is pure vibration, the creative frequency, the intelligence that shapes reality. Jesus, as the incarnate Word, did not only speak with words, he vibrated with the very structure of the universe. His words were resonances of the Logos, and that's why they held so much power. When he said, "Your faith has healed you," he was not attributing the healing solely to the other's belief, but to the vibrational openness that allowed the name to operate fluidly. Faith in this context is a field opening, it is vibrational availability, and miracles happen not as rewards, but as automatic responses to this alignment. The congenitally blind, another emblematic case, is healed with an apparently simple gesture: mud made with saliva, applied to the eyes, followed by an order to wash in a pool. But behind this symbolic gesture, there are layers upon layers of vibrational meaning. The saliva, a vehicle of genetic information; the earth, a symbol of the original matter; the water, purifying and conductive; the word, the trigger of frequency. The cure occurs when all these layers align. And this alignment is governed by a wisdom that Christ fully mastered, the science of the sacred names. He did not use mechanical formulas. He used presence, awareness, and vibration. And each miracle was, in fact, the inevitable consequence of this state of being. In the multiplication of the loaves, there is something even more subtle. Jesus first gives thanks. He doesn't ask. He doesn't beg. He gives thanks. This simple gesture is, vibrationally, one of the most powerful that one can perform. Gratitude opens portals, dissolves resistances, aligns the field with the frequency of abundance. By giving thanks before the food was visible, Christ was already operating at the level where abundance is constant. He was vibrating in certainty, not in scarcity, and this vibration was enough for matter to obey. When he distributed the loaves, he also distributed the frequency of satisfaction, of fullness, of communion. And everyone ate, not just with the body but with the soul. This miracle, like all others, is first and foremost a lesson on how vibration shapes experience. Christ did not use names as magical formulas, but as living expressions of the source. Each of his gestures was an activation, each silence, a preparation, each gaze, a beam of light. He became one with the intention, and this fusion of being, sound, and purpose is what made his acts so powerful. The name, on the lips of someone who vibrates with absolute love, becomes a decree. It becomes truth. It becomes reality. Therefore, miracles were not just external events. They were internal states manifested. And we, by understanding this, stop seeing miracles as legends and start seeing them as invitations. The 72 names in this context function as the primary codes that underpin each miracle. They are not ancient symbols frozen in time, but active frequencies, accessible to those who approach with humility, clarity, and purity of intention. Each name is a key, each key, a door, each door, a possibility for reconnection. Christ walked through these doors. He opened the paths and showed us that there is nothing to be worshipped outside. There is only what needs to be awakened within. Miracles are the natural consequence of a state of union with the divine, and this state can be accessed by anyone willing to remember who they truly are. The question then is no longer how miracles happened, but why we forget that they are possible. The modern world has taught us to distrust, to reduce everything to logic, to disbelieve in the invisible. But Christ taught us to vibrate, to trust, to chant the name with faith and surrender. He showed us that reality is not fixed, but fluid, that illness is not destiny, but imbalance, that death is not the end, but transition, and that sound, when uttered with truth, moves mountains, heals wounds, and resurrects lives. The miracle is available, the name is alive, and the word still dwells among us, waiting only for us to open our mouths, hearts, and consciousness so that he can once again create through us. Since the dawn of the Jewish spiritual tradition, there is a central mystery that remains undeciphered even for the most learned, the unnameable name of God. 4 letters, known as the sacred tetragrammaton, Yod, He, Vav, He, which form the unpronounceable name, unreachable by common human language. These letters do not compose a name in the usual sense of the word. They represent vibrational states, spiritual potencies, cosmic pulsations of creation and destruction, birth and rebirth. This name is considered so sacred, so pure, that for centuries it could not even be spoken aloud. Only the high priest inside the temple, at extremely specific moments, could chant it. And even then, many scholars assert that it was not exactly pronounced, but intoned as a sound that escaped the limitations of language. This name, which cannot be spoken, is also what sustains all that exists. It is the sound before the sound, the thought before the word, the consciousness before the form. And the 72 names of God are, according to the Kabbalistic tradition, fractal manifestations of this supreme name. They are its fragments, its emanations, its windows accessible to the human soul. The modern mind, conditioned to want to understand everything with definitions, categories, and logic, has enormous difficulty dealing with the concept of something that exists and operates but cannot be fully said, represented, or explained. However, that's exactly the point. The unnameable name cannot be captured by words because it does not belong to the plane of understanding. It vibrates beyond the mind. It is a presence. And when we touch this presence, even for a brief moment, we feel something within us awaken, something ancestral, eternal, that connects us to the origin of all things. The Kabbalists claim that this name is a portal of consciousness and not a sound like any other. When meditating on the letters Yod He Vav He, we are not trying to understand it. We are trying to enter it, pass through it, dissolve the limited identity to emerge as the vibration of the source itself. The 72 names, formed from the 3 verses in Exodus that recount the crossing of the Red Sea, are like bridges that lead to the greater name. Each one carries an aspect of the unnameable, a specific frequency that operates at a certain point in the soul and reality. Some activate healing, others the expansion of consciousness, others wisdom, others protection, others forgiveness, transmutation, courage, spiritual vision, emotional balance. And the most extraordinary thing is to realize that these frequencies are not just abstract concepts, they can be felt. When pronounced correctly, with intention and surrender, they provoke deep energetic reactions. The skin tingles, the heart warms, the breath changes, the subtle field reorganizes. It's as if the body remembers something that the mind had forgotten millennia ago. Because fundamentally, these names do not come from outside, they are expressions of what already lives within us. The mystical tradition teaches that the name of God is not something separate from the human being. It is imprinted on the soul, engraved on the heart. Each human being is, in essence, a spark of the unnameable name, a living fragment of divine consciousness. And when we chant the 72 names, we are not trying to reach something distant, but return to something within us. We are clearing layers of noise, beliefs, traumas, conditioning, illusions, and lies that have distanced us from our real identity. The name does not need to be found, it needs to be remembered, and this process of remembrance is the essence of the spiritual path. Christ, in performing his miracles, in healing with the word, in bringing life where there was death, was pronouncing, with his whole being, the unnameable name. Not aloud, but with his vibrational presence. He was the name, manifested in matter. This explains why the Gospels report that people bowed before him, cried, felt touched even without words. The frequency of the unutterable name, alive in his field, awakened in people something that was dormant. It was not just admiration, it was recognition. Something within them knew they were in the presence of a pure reflection of the divine, and this provoked healing, release, transformation. Not because Jesus did something, but because he was something. This difference is crucial. Miracles did not happen because he said the right words, but because he was the clear channel through which the word manifested without obstructions. He had emptied himself of ego, of desire, of control, and become a pure vessel of the original vibration. When he spoke, it was not just the voice of a man, it was the sound of the universe flowing freely. The Kabbalah explains that the unutterable name represents the four worlds of creation: Atziluth, emanation; Beriah, creation; Yetzirah, formation; and Asiya, action. Each letter of the Tetragrammaton corresponds to one of these worlds, and by chanting the derived names, we mobilize energies at these four levels simultaneously. This understanding is profound. It means that by consciously accessing one of the 72 names, we are operating at the level of spirit, mind, emotion, and matter all at once. We are not merely asking for change, we are creating change from the inside out. Therefore, the practice of the names is so powerful. It aligns all levels of being with divine intelligence, restoring the harmony that was fragmented by the human experience, disconnected from the source. It's common for us to think of God as something external, a separate being, distant, to whom we must be accountable or ask for favors. But the revelation of the unnameable name dissolves this separation. It reminds us that God is not outside, but in everything. That the name is not in heaven, but in the breath, in the silence, in the center of the chest. That the word is not imprisoned in books, but flowing in every atom, in every heartbeat. The 72 names are maps for this reconnection. They are not amulets, nor talismans, nor superstition. They are subtle engineering, spiritual science, tools to expand consciousness and awaken the divine being that inhabits each one of us. Christ understood this deeply. When he said, "I and the Father are one," he was not being metaphorical. He was speaking of a real fusion between his individual consciousness and the supreme consciousness. A fusion that is only possible when the ego completely dissolves. And it is in this state that the unnameable name reveals itself. Not as sound, but as experience. Not as doctrine, but as direct living. The name is not learned, it is remembered. And this remembrance happens in silence, in deep prayer, in meditation on the names, in the contemplation of existence, in the surrender of control. The name is the end of fear, the end of separation, the return to the Father's house, to unity, to peace. The vibration of the unnameable name cannot be captured by instruments, nor reproduced by technology. It can only be felt. And when we feel it, something changes forever. It's like crossing an invisible threshold, a portal of light that disintegrates us as ego and reintegrates us as soul. And from that point on, everything changes. The gaze changes, the word changes, the choices change. The world is no longer the same, because the one who sees is no longer the same. This is the true initiation. This is the true miracle. And the 72 names are the stairs we climb to reach this revelation, not as a conquest, but as a return. Therefore, it is not enough to just study the names. We must live with them, breathe with them, allow them to penetrate our cells, our speech, our gestures, our thoughts. We must let them unravel us so that the true name can inhabit us. This is the gateway to consciousness, the crossing of the inner desert, the passage of the symbolic Red Sea that we all carry in our hearts. On this side, fear, scarcity, doubt. On the other side, certainty, abundance, peace. And in the middle, the names. Like bridges of light that remind us that we were never separated, that the name has always been with us, that we are, each one of us, living letters of the eternal word. Reality as we perceive it is a perfectly structured illusion, a holographic projection that hides behind its solid forms a precise, complex, and infinitely intelligent vibrational architecture. What we call matter is nothing more than condensed energy, structured in frequency patterns that shape the visible from the invisible. This invisible matrix is the true field where everything happens. It precedes form, sustains time, governs physical laws, and coordinates the movements of consciousness. And it is in this matrix that the 72 names of God operate, not as religious words but as coded vibrational commands. Each name is a wave of information that is inserted into this universal field, reprogramming its patterns and restoring its original balance. The language of the names is not language in the human sense. It is a language of light, prior to articulated sound, prior to thought. It is the vibration of origin, which speaks directly to the DNA of creation. Modern science, especially quantum physics and field theory, is slowly beginning to glimpse this scenario. It can no longer be denied that there exists a unified field that connects everything to everything. A field where separation does not exist and where the observer's intention directly influences the behavior of the observed reality. This field, referred to by some as the zero-point field, by others as the Akashic field, or simply as the divine matrix, is the direct interface between the physical world and the spiritual world. And it is precisely in this field that the sacred names operate. They are not merely symbolic expressions, they are pure frequencies that reorganize reality at the information level. This means that, when chanting or meditating on one of the 72 names, we are literally inserting a new code into the matrix, a vibrational instruction that modifies the energy structures that support the events and forms around us. That's why Christ's miracles did not violate natural laws. They operated through subtler, higher laws that govern the matrix behind appearances. When he healed, he wasn't contradicting biology, but reprogramming the information fields that define the body's health. When he multiplied food, he wasn't manipulating matter, but expanding the vibrational matrix of abundance. When he calmed the sea, he wasn't challenging the forces of nature, but resonating with the balance code contained in the appropriate name for that situation. These acts, seen from the perspective of the spirit, are not magic. They are vibrational engineering. And the 72 names are the tools of this engineering. They are the building blocks of reality, the words of the universe's source code. This language of light is not new. It is older than time, older than the physical universe itself. It has existed since before creation, and it is through it that everything was made. The Kabbalists teach that God created the world using Hebrew letters. Each letter is a cosmic force. Each combination, a formula of manifestation. The 72 names, composed of triads of sacred letters, are expressions of this creative language. When we access these names with awareness, we are not just speaking to God, we are speaking as God. We are accessing the same matrix that shapes stars, rivers, mountains, and hearts. The difference lies in the intention. The source creates with love, with balance, with truth. And when we vibrate these qualities, we become co-authors of creation. It's important to understand that this language does not cater to egotistical desires. It is not in the service of vanity, manipulation, or control. The names only operate when the practitioner's vibration is aligned with the principles of light. That's why so many spiritual traditions insist on the purification of the mind and heart. The matrix responds to coherence, not to desire. If we emit a name with impure intention, the field recognizes the dissonance and does not respond. But if we vibrate with sincerity, with compassion, with surrender, the response is immediate. Reality bends, time reorganizes itself, the impossible dissolves, not by magic, but by resonance. Everything is sound, everything is vibration, and where there is harmonic vibration, there is manifestation. This language of light is not limited to audible sound. It is also visual, geometric, silent. The Hebrew letters, seen as sacred geometric shapes, hold power even when merely contemplated. Many masters recommend silent meditation on the names, simply observing the letters with the eyes of the soul. This activates the pineal gland, reorganizes the heart's electromagnetic field, and awakens dormant circuits of spiritual DNA. The body responds to these shapes because it was itself created from them. Our genetic code is a language, our soul is a vibration, our thoughts are waves. Everything in us is sensitive to the language of light, and when we come into contact with it, we come into contact with ourselves in our purest and truest state. Christ understood this on an absolute level. That's why he didn't need formulas. His presence was the formula. He was the embodied name, the living word, the perfect vibration. He walked upon the matrix as one walks on water, with lightness, with authority, with total confidence. His faith was not blind belief. It was lived spiritual science. And this is exactly what he taught, that everyone could do the same if they learned to access the same field, to vibrate with the same purity, to love with the same surrender. The 72 names are the map, the word is the path, and Christ is the living example that this path is real, possible, and destined for all. In practice, this means that every human being has the ability to co-create their reality, to transform pain into healing, scarcity into abundance, chaos into harmony. Not as an act of will, but as an act of alignment. When we are aligned with the matrix, when we think, speak, feel, and act in resonance with the truth of the Spirit, the names operate smoothly, synchronicity increases, diseases disappear, relationships harmonize, doors open, life flows. Because we stop swimming against the river and become the river itself. The language of light does not impose, it invites. And those who respond to this invitation rediscover the paradise that was never lost, only forgotten. Science is still in its infancy in this field. However, there are already studies showing how sound vibration affects the structure of water, how certain words alter the electromagnetic field around the body, and how sound can regenerate tissues, realign chakras, and activate elevated states of consciousness. Imagine then what could happen when we use the correct sounds, with the right intention, at the right time. Imagine what happens when we become finely tuned instruments of the divine symphony. That's what the 72 names offer us, the opportunity to resonate in unison with the source, to become conscious channels of the creative matrix, to co-write reality with the letters of light. This language is silent, yet powerful. It doesn't demand dogmas, intermediaries, or complex rituals. It only requires presence, an open heart, a willing spirit, an aligned body. When chanting a name, or simply meditating on it, something within us begins to rearrange. The pains don't disappear immediately, but they lose their strength. Doubts don't vanish, but they become silent. The mind doesn't understand, but the soul recognizes. And it's this recognition that heals, transforms, elevates. Because deep down, we are not learning something new. We are merely remembering. We are accessing the language with which we were written. We are returning to the beginning, to the Word, to the light. There comes a time in the journey when studying, contemplating, and reflecting are no longer enough. The soul yearns for direct experience, for real transformation, for embodied living of what was once merely spiritual information. It's at this point that the 72 names cease to be a distant mystical concept and become practical keys for a profound inner initiation, an initiation that doesn't rely on external temples, visible masters, or religious doctrines. It occurs in the silence of the soul, in the intimate space where light meets the shadows that need to be integrated. The 72 names are not magic formulas to solve immediate problems, but rather vibrational portals that operate on multiple dimensions of existence, granting access to levels of consciousness that resonate with the true spiritual identity of the human being. And when someone sincerely surrenders to this path, there is no aspect of life that remains untouched. This transformation begins subtly. When starting to work with the names, whether through visual meditation, sound intonation, or silent contemplation, the personal vibrational field begins to be reorganized. Dense frequencies, generated by destructive thoughts, repressed emotions, unhealed traumas, or toxic behavior patterns, start to be undone. The heart's electromagnetic field expands. The mind calms down, intuition intensifies, vital energy flows more clearly, and most importantly, a new perception of oneself and the world begins to emerge. What once seemed to be an insoluble problem begins to be seen as a lesson. What once caused pain is revealed as a teacher, and what seemed impossible becomes inevitable, because when the field changes, everything changes. The initiation that the 72 names promote is not linear nor predictable. It is deeply individual. Each person will be touched differently, as each name activates distinct areas of the being. One name may bring to light forgotten memories that need to be healed. Another may broaden awareness about repetitive patterns that sabotage the flow of abundance. Yet another may reveal a dormant inner strength, awakening courage, self-love, and compassion. And so, like pieces of a cosmic puzzle, the names fit together one by one, reorganizing the internal structure of the human being until they fully remember who they are, where they came from, and why they are here. This process can be challenging, often when chanting a name that works with emotional cleansing, for example. Old repressed pains may surface. Unexpressed emotions, stored fears, silent guilt, deep resentments. Everything that is hidden, but constantly vibrates and creates blockages, comes to the surface. Not as punishment, but as liberation. The name acts like a ray of light that penetrates the darkest caves of the psyche and reveals what needs to be transformed. And when the practitioner remains in this process with courage and surrender, healing occurs, not in a forced way, but through integration. The ego is not destroyed, it is educated. The shadow is not rejected, it is embraced. And thus, the person ceases to be a prisoner of themselves and becomes an ally of their own expansion. Besides the inner transformation, the names also promote tangible changes in the external life. As everything in the universe is vibration, when the internal frequency changes, the external results inevitably change as well. Relationships that were in conflict begin to harmonize. Opportunities that were once invisible start to appear. Health improves. Creativity flourishes. Money starts to flow more naturally. This happens because the 72 names operate as reality aligners. They do not create from nothing. They restore the natural order of things. And the natural order of life is abundance, is health, is love, is expansion. The chaos we experience is the result of disconnection, of vibrational noise, of forgetting our essence. The names restore this memory, and with it, they restore the flow. Practicing the names does not require perfection, but rather consistency. It doesn't matter if the mind still doubts, if faith wavers, or if emotions are unstable. What matters is the commitment to the process. Daily practice, even if brief, creates a field of constant transformation. Meditating on a name per day, breathing deeply while observing its letters, chanting its sacred sound in a low or high voice, writing its combination on a piece of paper and carrying it with you. These are all simple yet powerful ways to create a living relationship with these frequencies. And the deeper this relationship becomes, the more the names become a part of the being. They cease to be something that is practiced and become something that is embodied. The most extraordinary thing is to realize that the 72 names are not tools to conquer things, but rather instruments to remember what we have always been. They do not come to make us more powerful in the world. They come to make us more whole in our essence. And this wholeness, this internal coherence, is the real power. Because a person in coherence with their purpose, with their heart, with their soul, moves mountains. They do not need to shout, nor impose themselves. Their presence already transforms. Their word already heals. Their silence already inspires. This is the true initiation, becoming one with the original frequency, walking through life as a conscious channel of the light that permeates everything. Christ was the highest expression of this initiation. He lived in a continuous state of union with the name. Every word of his was a decree, every gesture a prayer, every miracle a natural consequence of his vibration. And he never said that he was the only one capable of this. On the contrary, he affirmed that all of us would do the same works, and greater. This is not a metaphor. It is an instruction. A reminder that the same word that operated through him also dwells in us. The 72 names are the instruments that tune this word within us. They are the steps of the ladder that lead from the mind to the spirit, from pain to healing, from separation to unity. The initiation process with the 72 names also teaches us about responsibility. For when awakening this inner power, it is necessary to use it wisely. Anything that is emitted at a high frequency returns with intensity. A word, a thought, an intention, when generated from a vibrational field aligned with the names, become potent seeds of reality. Therefore, the use of the names is always accompanied by humility, silence, and gratitude. The true initiate does not seek control, but service. They do not seek recognition, but presence. They do not seek power, but surrender. Because they know that they do not do, they allow. They do not act, they flow. They do not create, they co-create. The initiation promoted by the 72 names is therefore a return to the inner home, to the original language, to the divine identity that has never left us. It is a deconditioning, an unlearning to remember, a journey from within to the outside, where the sacred ceases to be a distant ideal and becomes a concrete, daily, real experience. And this return does not depend on dogma, nor on religion, nor on intermediaries. It depends only on the courage to look within and say yes. Yes to the light. Yes to the truth. Yes to transformation. Yes to the remembrance of the name that we have always vibrated, even amidst forgetfulness. At this point, it becomes clear that the 72 names are not a religious path, but a path of awareness. They do not require belief, but practice. They do not ask for blind devotion, but conscious presence. They are mirrors, they are codes, they are invitations. And those who respond to this call begin to live in a new way, more fulfilling, more aligned, more truthful, because they stop being victims of fate and become authors of their own reality. Because they stop living on the surface and dive into the depths of the spirit. Because they stop seeking outside and find within. The 72 names do not promise a life without challenges, but they offer tools to navigate any challenge with wisdom, with peace, and with inner power. We stand before a collective crossroads, a humanity exhausted from ready-made answers, saturated with empty formulas, and religion without essence, cries out for a truth that cannot be manipulated, institutionalized, or reduced to dogmas. Amid this silent outcry, the figure of Christ re-emerges with vigor, not as an icon of a specific religion, not as a symbol of passive worship, but as a living expression of a state of consciousness that transcends time, culture, and belief. Christ, as an archetypal vibration, represents the fully awakened divine spark, the human being in its original state of unity with the all. And the language he spoke was not made only of words, but of frequencies, intentions, and vibrational states so high that they directly touch the spirit. It was a silent language that said everything without saying anything, a language that heals, liberates, transforms, and elevates. And this language, which once seemed exclusive to him, now calls us to be understood, remembered, reactivated, because it is also ours. The Christ consciousness does not belong exclusively to Jesus. He was its most sublime representative, the supreme example of someone who fully embodied the divine spark and lived it in its entirety. But this same consciousness is latent in every human being. It sleeps in our bones, breathes in our silences, pulses behind our fears. The language of the 72 names is the bridge between common consciousness and this awakened consciousness. Each name is like a note from the Christ symphony, a thread that connects the soul to the source, an activation of a forgotten memory that, once retrieved, changes everything. There is no way to vibrate with the names and remain the same. There is no way to open your heart to this vibration without seeing reality reorganize itself before us. Because the external world is nothing more than the reflection of our internal field, and when this changes, that responds. Christ spoke with an authority that did not come from the world. It was not the power of imposition, but the power of embodied truth. He did not argue. He revealed. He did not convince. He made one remember. Each parable, each gesture, each silence carried a frequency that penetrated beyond the mind. His language was not linear, logical, or intellectual. It was circular, intuitive, symbolic, archetypal. It was the language of the soul speaking to the soul. That's why the crowds gathered around him and remained silent, even without understanding everything with reason. Because the soul understood. Something opened, something was touched. This language is the same that vibrates in the 72 names. When chanted with purity, the names speak to the soul. They do not ask the mind to understand. They ask the entire being to listen. In practice, living the language of Christ is living in a state of presence. It's transforming every word spoken into a conscious act of creation. It's realizing that every thought, no matter how subtle, carries with it a frequency that shapes reality. It's taking radical responsibility for what we emit, in speech, in thought, in emotion, in action. And this is exactly what the 72 names teach us. By working with them, we are led to refine our vibration, to align our intention, to purify our field. It's impossible to repeat the names with sincerity and continue cultivating feelings of anger, judgment, envy, or victimhood. Because they pull us upward, they place us in front of the soul's mirror, they confront us with the truth of what we are, and at the same time, they show us the path back to the origin. The new consciousness awakening in humanity will not come through external structures, charismatic leaders, or superficial collective movements. It will arise from within, quietly, when an increasing number of individuals decide to recall their original language, when, tired of merely surviving, they choose to live fully. When they exchange fear for love, separation for unity, noise for listening. This consciousness will not be imposed but recognized, and the language of Christ will be its foundation, not as doctrine, but as vibration, not as an idea, but as a living practice. The 72 names are the steps of this ladder, and each one who traverses them ignites a new light in the invisible network that connects all beings. This network, this sacred web of shared consciousness, is the true body of Christ. A collective body formed by all those who resonate with truth, compassion, justice, wisdom, and peace. A living body pulsating in every corner of the world, in the hearts that have chosen to remember. The Christ-like language is the blood that circulates in this body, carrying information, frequencies, revelations. And the 72 names are the codes that keep this circulation fluid, harmonious, coherent. The more people chant the names, the more the planetary field elevates, the more the matrix of fear dissolves, the more the veils fall, the more the truth blossoms. This is the true purpose of this ancient wisdom, not to make us special, but to remind us that we are all sacred, not to distance us from the world, but to make us agents of its regeneration, not to create new walls, but to dissolve all borders. The language of Christ knows no race, religion, gender, status, culture, or geography. It recognizes only one thing, the being that vibrates in love. It is this vibration that the names awaken, and once awakened, we can no longer go back to sleep. The truth once felt can no longer be ignored. It becomes a guide, nourishment, a sacred fire that illuminates the path. And on this path, something extraordinary happens. The search ceases. The neediness disappears. Fear loses its meaning. The struggle dissolves. Because what once seemed to be outside reveals itself within. What once seemed unreachable becomes present. What was once a dream becomes reality. Not because the world has changed, but because we have changed. Because we've learned to speak again with the word. Because we've begun to resonate with the name. Because we've stopped asking and started creating. Because we've abandoned the illusion of separation and merged with the source. This is the call of the new era, an era not marked by technological advancements, but by expansions of consciousness, not by external revolutions, but by internal reconfigurations, an era where miracles return to being natural, where the invisible becomes trustworthy again, where spirituality ceases to be a concept and returns to being an experience, where the human being remembers that he is, always has been and always will be, an extension of light, an expression of the name, a note in the eternal song of the universe. And the 72 names are here now, as a 1,000-year-old gift delivered to the present time. A gift that, when received with humility, initiates a completely new future. This future is not something distant. It begins the moment a being decides to remember, the moment a voice opens to intone the name, the moment a heart decides to forgive, the moment a mind chooses to be silent, the moment a body aligns with the truth of the soul. The awakening of the new consciousness will not come with trumpets, but with whispers. Not with crowds, but with awakened souls. Not with noise, but with creative silence. And in this silence, the sound of the word will echo, the vibration of the name, the presence of Christ, not outside, but inside. Inside you, inside me, inside all of us. What did you feel when you discovered this forgotten language? Which of the 72 names resonated most with your soul? Share here in the comments what touched you the most. When we declare together, we manifest faster. This is the power of consciousness in unity. What if I told you that Jesus left a complete map with 33 hidden steps towards full consciousness awakening? Click now on the video that's popping up on your screen. The Book of 33 Steps, the hidden map Jesus left for enlightenment. And continue your journey with us. See you there, Mind Unfettered.